Hi and welcome to my writing blog. I'm Susanna, author and freelance book formatter. My debut novel Katie is a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, and I've also published an urban fantasy short story In the Shadow of Death. If you have followed along with my writing blogs, you know that I'm currently working on 3 different projects. My main writing project is Project Prehistory, a coming-of-age story set in a prehistoric matriarchal society. My plan is to start querying the book early next year, but currently the manuscript is resting. I want to read it one more time, probably in November or December, right before I start querying. But in the meantime, I've been doing query prep. So that means that I have compiled a list of agents and I've researched them, and I now have a pretty good idea of who I want to query. And I've also drafted my query letter and synopsis. But I still need to edit and polish both of those documents. I've scheduled a critique for the query letter in late October, and that means that I still have about a month and a half to make it better. The second project is a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice. I started working on draft 2 during a writing retreat that I shared in my last writing blog. The first half of the retelling has been really easy to edit, and I'm almost at the midpoint. Yesterday I started working on the scene where Lizzie learns about Darcy's involvement in breaking up Jane and Bingley. That scene will be followed by Darcy's first proposal and his letter. I'm obviously adapting those scenes for my own context, but that sequence is so integral part of Pride and Prejudice that I want to include those scenes in my retelling. But that's not what I'm working on today. Today I want to focus on my third project, which is a cozy fantasy short story. In my last vlog I mentioned that the short story was with beta readers. I got their feedback in late July and it was really positive. Basically I only needed to do some minor tweaks and clarify a few things. I made those edits in early August, and since then the manuscript has been resting. But now I think I'm ready to send it to a literary magazine. Before that I want to read the short story one more time. I think this will be mostly a proofread, although I might do some minor line edit things if I want to change some sentences. Unfortunately, it seems that not many magazines that publish fantasy are interested in cozy fantasy. It seems that those magazines are looking for more high-stakes fantasy stories. Which is interesting because I think that the low stakes of cozy fantasy really works for short stories. But I did find one magazine which might be a match. So I'm going to start by sending the short story to that particular magazine. But for that I also need a cover letter, which shouldn't take me too long because I can use the cover letter I wrote for my literary fiction short story. And just change the name of the short story and the word count. So let me open my document and start proofreading. I did some minor tweaks to the short story, but interestingly, even though I deleted some words, I also added some words, so the word count is exactly the same as it was when I started. But now I've read the short story, I've written the cover letter, and I've checked the submission guidelines, and I'm ready to send it. The other magazines where I've sent my literary fiction short story used Submittable or some other online form, but this magazine wants email submissions. So I'm going to copy paste everything to the email and triple check everything before I hit send. It's done, and now I just have to wait for several weeks before I get a response. And I immediately got an auto reply that confirms that my submission was received. As I was checking the submission guidelines, I found a couple of other magazines where my short story might be a fit, but they are not currently open. So I have to keep an eye on those magazines in case they become open for submissions. It's the next day, and today I'll be working on the Pride and Prejudice retelling. Yesterday evening I finished the scene that I was talking about where Lizzie learns about Darcy's involvement in breaking up Jane and Bingley. So now that I've got my main character into an emotional state where she is not at all interested in hearing what Darcy has to say, I'm ready to move on to the next scene where Darcy proposes to her. Although in my modern version he obviously doesn't actually propose. My goal today is to edit at least the proposal scene and the following scene with Darcy's letter and hopefully also the next scene. So I want to edit at least 2 scenes, hopefully 3. Let's get to work. Considering how conflict aversive I am in real life, it's surprisingly fun to write a scene where 2 characters argue, especially when you know that those 2 characters are going to end up together. On to the next scene. Let's destroy Lizzie's life by revealing Darcy's and Wickham's backstory. I only had time to edit 2 scenes, but there were a lot of nitty-gritty details that I needed to tweak in order to make the backstory timeline make sense. In any case, that was 5 hours well spent. It's a couple of days later and I have an update on my short story. I had fully expected to have to wait weeks or even months, but I already got the response and that was a no. They said that the concept was interesting, but it wasn't a good fit for the magazine. Now I have to wait for other magazines to open their submissions, but in the meantime I'm going to focus on the retelling. The first half of the manuscript was rather simple to edit, but the second half needs a lot more work. Clearly at some point during the drafting process I ran out of steam and the second half is a lot shorter than the first half. So in order to make sure that the midpoint is at midpoint, I have to add a lot of words to the second half of the manuscript. That means that I need to develop the existing scenes further and draft at least 2 completely new scenes. The first of which I hope to get to today. But before I get to that scene, I need to finish one scene and edit another. So let's get to work. Finishing that scene took me longer than I expected. I had only about 200 words left of that scene, but after I finished the scene I had edited 518 words. So at least I'm making the text longer. That's also why this takes so long. But let me at least get started on the next scene. I finished that scene, it took me a couple of hours and I added a few hundred words to it as well. Next would be the new scene that I need to draft, but I don't think I have the brain power to do it right now. I might look at the outline I have for that scene and add something to it, but I think I'll start drafting it next week. But I'll end the vlog here. Thank you for joining me and I'll see you in my next video.